welcome again to another episode of Here We Grow at the Hive Garden Studios. Guys, I am super excited to meet with this amazing individual that's making change. He's a creative. He is forward thinking. Without this being said, we'll get him to introduce himself. Hey.
Okay. Hey.
Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you your name, where you was born and raised, and what is it that you do?
Okay. Name is Hamid Ibrahim. I was born in Uganda, but I was after 1 year old, from 2 years old and so on until 8. I spent that time in Kenya, so naongea Swahili. So that's why my Swahili is not Ugandan sounding Swahili.
Yeah.
And then from there back to Uganda, and then I moved to the UK right before I turned 18. So at the moment, I'm more focusing on creative leadership. So started off my career in visual effects, worked on a few big films over there, then transitioned to starting on my own company, Kugali, which focuses on telling authentic African stories in the highest quality. Started off with comic books, did some augmented reality, and now we are best known for the animation we did.
Yes. Yeah. And if you guys haven't seen this animation, you need to go on Disney and check it out. Explain to us, what is this animation? What's the name?
The name of them is Iwájú.
Yes.
And
the meaning again?
The meaning of the Iwájú. Okay.
Yes.
So hopefully I don't butcher it. Tolu, it's been a while since I've done an interview talking about Iwájú's name description. Yeah. So it comes from a Yoruba word, which means the future, which is Ojo Iwájú.
Yes.
But obviously, if you're gonna put the whole thing, people are gonna confuse it. So we just removed Ojo and it's just Iwájú. Now Ojo Iwájú means the day ahead. Day ahead in Yoruba, there's no word that says future. That's how they say the future. So that's the title. That's where it came from. The story takes place in the future, takes place about 100 years in the future in Lagos, Nigeria. So that's in terms of the creative side of what the name is and what Iwájú is. But the significance of the project actually is not even in the creative side. It's more on the achieving from the business side and what that actually meant. Because this was the first time in Walt Disney, it's a collaboration between us and Disney. This is the first time in Walt Disney's 100 years of existence that they've ever collaborated with another entity to create an original animation. And usually a way this makes sense to people is if you look at any Disney title, any Disney property, the title of the project only has Disney's name or a company they own. This is the first time it's the title of the project, has Disney's name and our name. So Kugali's name is up there on the title. In all the merchandising, every single thing. Yes.
How did you guys manage this?
I think it's a combination of factors, right? There is, I think, 3 things I would put down for that. Number one, the timing had to be right. So we have no control over that. People can call it luck if you want, right? But we have no control over timing. Number 2 is the timing means nothing if you're not prepared. So we had a level of preparedness for this and a level of comfortability with just approaching big goals as a company. And we stayed to our goal, which was authentic African storytelling. And a lot of people, I think, they missed out on a lot of opportunities because they start diverging from the goal because, as you know, life does what life does, right? It starts pushing you around. And people tend to diverge from the goal and they go too far away from the goal that when an opportunity shows up to where they could hit that goal, they're nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
And we always stayed true to our vision of what Kugali was supposed to be with the stories it tells. And this put us in a position where, one, when Disney saw there was an interview with BBC, I actually met one of the guys who were in the office when they did that filming of us, so from back in the day. And in that interview, they filmed us for about a whole day. We had just launched a Kickstarter. It was the first ever Pan-African comic book anthology.
Yeah.
And it was making waves because it's the first thing like this people have seen. BBC did the piece on us after the whole day of filming. In there's a question I was asked and I responded with, "We are going to kick Disney's ass in Africa." Yeah. Now, from that statement, the whole thing just switched up because me as a person, I don't talk in that way. So I thought they would never use it. Turns out when the little article and the video came out, the heading of it was comic book company says they're going to kick Disney's ass. Now, I was worried about it, but I actually did the job because that's what got us on Disney's radar.
Yeah.
Because Jen Lee, who was then the chief creative officer of Disney, saw that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who are these Kugali guys? She was so excited. She tells the side of the story. If you watch the documentary,
Yeah.
you can see how excited she gets.
Yeah.
She tells the side of the story. And then she goes online. She sees our work. She's like, yo, these guys are making great stories and everything. And if you think about timing-wise, at that time, Disney were thinking of doing something new. And we came in presenting them with that new thing they could do. Now, because the approach came from that angle and we had a conversation, it wasn't like, let's talk about doing a project. They just met up just to talk. And our project arose from that. That's what provided the opportunity for it to be something different. In other words, if you're doing this in the same old way they normally do things, there is no way it could be a fast in this kind of way.
Yeah.
But because it started from a different way, you can see how we end up with a different result. Actually, let me just take off my jacket real quick here.
Yes. Going back to Hamid, where did it all start for you?
I think there's multiple points you can call the start. So if it comes to what formed me as a person, there are a few lucky moments, I call them that. One of the most pivotal ones in terms of my self-belief in myself. Self-belief in myself. Let's say that.
I got it.
One of them is just purely there's a time we're in a family house and my aunt was listening to a motivational video. And I was coming downstairs and I caught it on the way. Now, what I was going to do, I was going to play, you know how when you juggle the ball football? We would compete amongst ourselves, but lots of kids. But there was one cousin who would always win. And as I was walking past the door, I caught when a human mind can achieve what it is forced to achieve. And I had that and I was like, let me try this new strategy. And that's the first time I beat him. Now, it could have just been dumb luck, could have just been he had a bad day. But because my experience at that time was, hey, I believed I could beat this guy and ended up beating him, my mind went, okay, the belief systems are building up from there. So you can see how my belief in myself built up from there. So I always believed I can do anything. So that was one very key moment. There's two others. One of them is slightly negative. Actually, I just realized something, right? I'm going to try and give advice or lessons from two perspectives. There is the light side, and I'm going to call it the other side, the dark side. So like this first story I told you, it's very light. The second one, opposite. Because what happened was, at this time, I'm not going to lie, my ego was huge, right? Because this was during uni, and I would work so fast when I was studying animation, right? And I would create so quickly. And we had a course module which was due in 2 weeks, right? It was a 2-month project. And I decided to restart my whole thing with 2 weeks left. And I thought, of course I can, I'm Hamid. I did not sleep for 3 nights in a row. It's the first time I hallucinated in my life. It was hilarious. If you've been University of Hertfordshire, you know how the library is set up. There's like a computer room where it's only for like the people who need the more powerful computers. And there's a kind of mirror separating us from the rest of the library. And that time it was around 2, 3 in the morning. This was night 2 only of not sleeping. And I remember I looked up and I looked to the right and I saw somebody lifting up a baby and like playing with the baby in the library. I remember I looked away, then I looked back. And I remember thinking, how did the baby get in the library? And then I looked back again, I noticed they were just adjusting the screen height. And that's when I was like, okay. Now, from that experience, I learned a bit more humility, right? It's that thing of a lot of the times when you can do stuff, a lot of people tend to put themselves in a unnecessary disadvantage. And that's a big lesson I learned there. Because a lot of people are smart, but they waste the smartest in dumb stuff, right? So, for example, if you're very energetic, and then you say, oh, you know what, I'm gonna run a marathon today. Why? Just because I can, right? I'd say don't do the approach, right? Maybe do a 10K, and then that rest of the energy that you're gonna use to run a marathon. If your goal is to do something else, use that energy for that something else. So now it's more accurately allocating where the energy goes. That's a big lesson that came from there. So the self-belief and then kind of prioritizing where your energy goes was a big one. And then third huge one I learned was this was when I was quitting my job when I was working in the Hollywood movies. I remember I meeting up the person who ran the studio and I asked and I just went there for advice. And the advice he gave me really stuck with me because of the kind of person I am. He said, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. Now, for somebody who's trying to do a lot of things, that's a really solid piece of advice because it removes that thing for which most people want to end up doing everything, right? And because you don't really think about it, right? Most people who are like, let's say if you're smart or you're very ambitious or you're very talented in something, and you're looking at somebody else doing something and they're doing it worse than you do it, you're like, I should just do it. And then you take away from the other things you're doing, right? But that advice always kept me in check in terms of helped me in terms of building a team and everything. It kind of really solidified that area. So those 3 moments really formed me as a person. To a point, there's another one that came later, but that one it's a way deeper one. That comes to when times are hard. Because I call myself the luckiest man alive because my career for a while, it was just win after win after win after win. And there's some lessons I had to learn that had to come from a loss. So yeah.
Okay. Was this all whilst you were in Uganda or had you moved?
The family home one was Uganda, right? That's a juggling the ball one was Uganda. The one with the guy with studio was obviously here. And then the other one, let me say, I gave the belief one. I gave the union one. Obviously, I went to university here.
With your animation, explain like these ideas. Where do they come from? How do you put it on paper?
Everybody has ideas. That's one thing I can guarantee every single person has, right? Actually, I believe every single person has at least one good story in them. Is the execution gets hard, but obviously you have to have it's a combination of skill, resources, and time, pretty much, right? So if you have the skill, you have the time, you have no resources, you can kind of make it, but it will never be. You can't quite execute your vision properly, and it's always a debate with the world to give you one of those in some kind of fashion. So everybody has a good story. Getting the skill that's in your control much easier today. You have YouTube, you have Chat GPT even better than YouTube in terms of learning at the moment, right? So that's in terms of your skills. When it comes to resources, that's usually the hardest one for most people in our position, and then time would be the other one. So just the time to actually put into the craft. Yeah. So it's not that complicated. It's just hard to do.
And prioritizing what one you do first or like
Just depends on you and your position, right? So I'll give an example. Let's say the way I go into the animation field is very different from the way you can get into it, just based on your life experience and where you are in life when you start going to the journey. So you may be in a position where it's easier for you to come to the resources and the time, but you don't have the skills. So you just have to find a place to get the skills, which are like if you have resources makes a lot of life easier, right? You can easily get somebody who has the skills and everything along those lines. But one of the values, because everything has disadvantage, right? I'll go through each of them. Let's say if you have resources, the disadvantage is it may rob you from the purpose of that. So in other words, if you learn to, whichever art you learn to do, there is a way it affects you, how you learn it. In other words, the journey to learning it has its own lessons, right? That if you just have the resources, you could miss out on that, right? So that's advantage of resources. You can get the other things easier. Disadvantages, it robs you of the lessons you need to learn, right? That's resources wise. If you go to time, advantage of time, right? If you have time, you can do something. The disadvantage here is again, if you have a lot of time, it's super easy to procrastinate. Like the less, if you have a deadline, you're jumping on that. But if you have all the time in the world, it's easy to procrastinate, right? So advantage, disadvantage. And then when it comes to skill, if you have the skill, there's a disadvantage where you're almost locked. There's a way the world tries to lock you into only doing the thing with that skill you have versus exploring it as as a whole human to the world. So in other words, if you're a very good artist drawing in 2D anime, let's say, it's very easy to get locked into only doing that versus to see where you can apply yourself in the rest of the world. In other words, you become the 2D artist drawing guy, right? So if you're really good at that, but if you're crap at that, the world very easily starts telling you, try this as well, try that as well, right? So you get that variety there.
the journey for you and for all that you and the team have done, it is mind blowing. Mind blowing. And it's a good way. It's a good thing, mind blowing. Or how do you guys keep sane with each other?
That's really easy. Respect is a big thing because we're all very different individuals, which is our strength, right? Like if you meet me and then you meet Tolu, you meet Ziki, you're like, these are three, like how did these three human beings end up in the same space? That's the question that'll come to your mind. And that's been a superpower for us, right? In terms of our just tenacity is what we like. In terms of our skills as well, we're very different. But as long as we respect each other, it works out really, really well. So respect is a big one. And obviously, when sometimes tensions run high, and we just make sure you rail things in respectfully, right? And then I'm a big proponent of, again, as a leader, you look after the people first, and then they'll look after you. If they don't look after you, you picked bad people, it's still your fault, right? But as a leader, you look after the people first, always, right? So if, for example, right now I'm CEO, if there's a whole mess going on and the mess is affecting me, my job is not to be like, you guys, this mess is affecting me. No, I'll be like, hey, let's sort out these guys first. After they're sorted out, then you can sort yourself out. So that's how I look at it. But generally, it's been pretty smooth just because, again, I think between us, we do respect ourselves, like amongst ourselves. It's been a very big advantage. That's something that I was just lucky with because you don't know that until, because you can see somebody is a respectful person and then 2 years later they switch up on you. It's been like 5, 6 years. These guys have been the same, or we've all been cool. Everything works out well. And if I don't know, I don't think people don't quite understand how different we are from each other.
I've seen it on the documentary. I'm like, oh, you can literally
Yeah.
tell. Like there are three of you, but it works.
Yeah.
It works. What's the hardest thing that you've experienced on your journey?
On the journey. Remember when I mentioned the bump last year? Mm-hmm. That was the hardest one. Just for context, in terms of how hard it was, I remember I was just coming back from LA, right? And that week of when that happened, I have asthma, but my asthma is not that bad. Now, I didn't even know it could get that bad. It was so bad. My body, again, I made sure not to freak out as a person, but you cannot control what your body does, right? So in meetings and everything, people are like, yo, you've been solid. But I remember I was getting an average of about 10 to 11 asthma attacks a day. Now, my mom is a nurse. She told me after, I never knew. She told me after that, if you to get 3 a day, you're supposed to go A&E after 3. I was on 11 for a whole week. That's how much my body was freaking out.
Jeez.
I couldn't sleep because you're sleeping mid-sleep. You can't breathe.
Oh my
You
goodness.
wake up. So that was hard. And I'll actually, anybody in a position that in that hard position, there's piece of advice I landed on. I wish I could find her name. If I find it, I'll send it to you so you can have it there so she gets a credit. It's an app called Masterclass.
Yeah.
And in there was a lady, a black lady. And she was telling the story of she went for advice to one of her mentors. Her mentor told her, when you're in a storm, you don't look at the storm and try to walk through the storm, you'll fall down. You look down, you put your leg, you make sure that leg you put down is very firm. You focus on each footstep you're making forward, right? And I've had advice like that before, but that time it just rang so true because literally I was just losing it. Like I was trying to keep my head straight. I was keeping my head as straight as possible, right? But pretty much there was no good decision I could make. Every decision was going to be a bad one. So you're trying to pick on, okay, which bad decision is going to have the least amount of damage. And then that piece of advice there kept me going because I was like, I'm just going to do the best I can do today. What's the best I can do right now? What's the best thing I can do right now? This is it. Okay, I'm going to do that. So the analogy I use is you look up at the storm to plan out your course. Then you look back down. You take that step, make sure that step is good. The whole thing, I was like, I can't afford to fall down. Because literally, it was one of the things where one mistake, one slip up, that's it. That's it. So that was probably, if I'm going hardest time, that was probably it right there.
My last question to you. A place like the Hive, growing up, getting into your craft, or even after university, having a space like this, what would it have meant for you as a creative?
I'm going to give you a very weird answer. I don't even think it's the answer you guys want, but it's a true answer. Because of the kind of student I was, the kind of guy I was, very unwise, to be honest. But I would have completely ignored it. That's just me. Just because I was one of those guys where I was like, I got the computer. And to be fair, some of it is down to most places you go have certain requirements of you. And that time, my mind was just on the only requirement I have on myself was I gotta get this working. And I was so singular minded in that, which is a superpower at that time, right? Because people right now say I work hard. I was like, then it was crazy because I had a laptop and a computer, right? I'd work on the computer, I'm tired working on the computer, I'd go work on the laptop on the bed. I would doze off with the laptop on the bed. I'd wake up, I continue working with the laptop on the bed, I go brush my teeth, get the food, go wait on the computer, I'm working on the computer. That was my life for time. Matter of fact, my mom was so worried about this. I'll still let my mom know. She was worried about this. And it's not like I went, I'm going to do it less. I moved out of the house. And I was the brokest I was at that time. I was like, bruh, I need to execute this. Yeah. So if you can imagine in that mindset, right? What I'm thinking about is just work. Yeah. And usually institutions, again, I can see the advantage. This is weird. Now I'm older, I can see the way I would have benefited so much from it. Yeah. But at that time, who I was then, I didn't want any restrictions on my working ability. So in other words, if you guys were like, you can come here and we will not bother you at all. Matter of fact, you just have to, like the only requirement you have to do is sign in. I'll be like, okay, cool, I'll do it. But most places usually won't be on that. But if I'm thinking about it with the network of people around here, with everything around here, I would have benefited a lot. For example, we had the guy who was doing the filming of the motion capture and all that. I would have used that. In other words, right? But to get me here, that would have been the hassle. But I love this space a lot.
Yes,
I
thank
love
you.
it a lot. I like the vision of the place. And as you say, your CEO, he's pretty cool. I spoke to him. I was like, yeah, I like this guy as well. So, yeah, something I'm thinking about. Something I've been from the first time I came here. I was like, okay, I'll just have that in the back of the mind as we're doing stuff here.
Thank you. And I look forward for when that day comes. We can embrace you and support you in every way that we can. Yes.
We'll do the best as well to embrace you guys and support you guys in every way we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you once again, guys. We had the amazing CEO, creative, a brother. So thank you for your time. We had him on the show. I'm so excited.
You're welcome.
I wish you all the best, you and the team, and more successes and more stories in the Caribbean. Thank you.